Greetings and salutations, listener. Welcome back to another edition of the Coco and Daltz podcast. Remember us? We review movies and movies.
And TV shows like we're reviewing today.
Oh, and TV shows on streaming services such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple Plus, HBO Max, and Zippy's fabulous TV shows.
Also Disney Plus.
And Disney Plus. Although we haven't done a Disney Plus in a while. Although we're doing a big one coming up, aren't we?
We are. This is all me. So.
Oh, by the way, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.
And so before we get too sidetracked here, Coco, what are we reviewing today?
Today, speaking of TV shows,
yes,
we are reviewing the brand new season of Kids in the Hall.
Oh, man.
That was just released recently on Amazon Prime Video. If you aren't aware, Kids in the Hall originally ran for 5 seasons from 89 through 95 on the CBC. They are 5 Canadian guys: Dave Foley, Bruce McCullough, Kevin McDonald, Mark McKinney, and Scott Thompson.
Look at you.
They're a Canadian comedy troupe. They did, a sketch comedy show, a la Saturday Night Live, Mad TV.
Second City,
correct. So they've been off the air since 95. They've done a movie and another non-comedy show since then. They've also gone on tours. They've each done their own things here and there, like Dave Foley was on News Radio, but Amazon Prime Video commissioned a 6th season of the original sketch comedy show, so they are back.
They are back. Kids in the Hall.
With 8 episodes in the 25-ish minute range.
Very digestible.
Yeah. So, got anything to add to that summary, Daltz?
No, it was perfect.
Like I love.
Exactly.
So, what did you think of the new season of Kids in the Hall?
So, loaded question. So, just a little bit of background first, listener, because so I grew up in Toronto. And as you may know, because, you are an ardent and deep follower of our podcast, so you know all the facts about us. Grew up in Toronto, and in those days, Kids in the Hall was on the CBC, like Coco said, and it was played late at night. So it was one of those things that was edgy, and it was like Saturday Night Live, Canadian Saturday Night Live. It came about after Second City SCTV, and it was a lot edgier. And it was kind of like this late night, come home from a bar, watch show. And I like to say this, that Kids in the Hall has picked up exactly where they left off in the late 80s, early 90s, in that they're not funny at all.
Oh, what?
I was in pain watching this.
I could tell because you did look at your phone a lot.
You always say that. I always look at my phone.
I know, but
I'm just seeing like what, if I got some DMs or anything like that.
Hey, ladies who watch good TV, hit me up. My girlfriend is watching this crap, and I got some time on my hands.
I don't want to pay attention to it. So, Kids in the Hall, I never got Kids in the Hall the first time around. The chicken lady and the squishing your head, and I watched it. I tried. I really tried back in the day, sober and not sober. And I think clearly you need to be not sober to enjoy this.
They were clearly not sober when they wrote a few of the sketches.
Right. And props to them for trying again. I don't think they've lost anything. I think they're just as unfunny as they were earlier.
Wow.
So
you're going to give this less than a 7, which is what you give everything.
It might be like a 6.8 or something like that.
Aw, buddy.
So I was not a fan in those days, and they are consistent, and I'm not a fan. I mean, there are moments where it was pretty funny, and I really like all the guys. Like, the personalities are really good. Bruce McCullough, Kevin McDonald, Scott Thompson. I really like all the guys, all 5 of them. Mark McKinney and Dave Foley, obviously, too. I really like all the guys, and they're sort of around my age, like they're a little bit older than me.
The youngest one is Dave Foley, and he's 59.
Yeah, and so they're a little bit older than me, but I'd like to say a lot older than me, but it's not really true. So that we're kind of the same generation and that sort of thing. And Scott Thompson is from the same town I am in Ontario, suburban Toronto, and I just really wanted to like it. And the teasers were really funny. I kept saying to Coco, I said, "We got to watch this. This looks really funny." And I didn't think it was funny. So, Coco, now that I've rained on your parade...
You have.
And I'm sleeping on the couch...
You are.
What did you think of this new iteration of Kids in the Hall?
Well, since you shared your background with Kids in the Hall,
Yes.
I will share mine.
Yes, please do.
My background with Kids in the Hall is basically the exact opposite of Dalt's. I am not Canadian. I grew up in the American Midwest where we did not have the CBC.
Oh.
So I did.
How did you get by?
And I was also like 12 years old when Kids in the Hall debuted. So we weren't watching Kids in the Hall in the Coco household. I didn't discover Kids in the Hall. Like, I heard of them, but I didn't actually watch them until my last year of college when Comedy Central was showing Kids in the Hall 23 hours a day.
Oh.
Like, they would take a break to show South Park
And then go back to it.
and then go back to Kids in the Hall.
Wow.
So I've seen every Kids in the Hall episode multiple times. I've only seen the movie once. I've only seen the non-Kids in the Hall show that they did, which is called Death Comes to Town. I've only seen that once. I don't remember anything about either one of those two, except for the characters Don and Marv that appeared in the Revival series that just came out.
Yeah.
Those were in Brain Candy, but otherwise I don't remember anything about either one of those two things. So it's not a stretch to say that Kids in the Hall basically got me through my last year of college.
Wow.
So
You should have gone first, because then I would have changed my opinion.
So I love Kids in the Hall.
Oh.
And I did like the Revival series.
Wow.
I did. I didn't love it. I did like it a lot. It kind of felt Chappelle's Show to me in that the beginning kind of started off a little hit or miss, and then as the series went on it got stronger, and then the wheels kind of came off a little bit, but in a good way.
Yeah.
I believe it was episode 7. There was a recurring sketch where Mark McKinney plays this kind of it's called Tadley, and he's kind of like a motivational speaker / the more you know type guy.
Yeah.
And it's just drugs were done.
Oh, yeah.
When that sketch was written.
Well, and the whole thing, he comes to some sort of conclusion, and this is the lesson you should learn, and it goes, Tadley, and then there's all these little stickers go on the screen.
Emojis, every random emoji,
and
just a monkey was hitting a keyboard randomly, and all these emojis
and it makes
up.
you kind of freaked out. Imagine if you're on something, you're you're totally cool with it.
If you actually did drugs.
Right.
And this
you're sitting back there going, this makes complete sense.
Right.
This is changing my world. Whereas if you're not, we were just kind of stone cold sober. And
shockingly,
we should have
been drinking.
We should have been doing something.
Yeah.
Because I think that would have helped a lot. It would have helped me anyway.
Well, I did go see them when they went on tour around '02.
Oh, yeah?
They came to...
You're a big fan.
I was a big fan. I even, back in the 90s, I went on the interwebs and I downloaded a picture of all 5 guys because me and 2 of my friends in college were such huge fans that I made t-shirts for all of us with a picture of the Kids in the Hall on the front, and then on the back it was top 10 funniest lines from Kids in the Hall.
Wow.
I don't think I still have that shirt. I think I gave it to Goodwill or something.
So this was before Etsy.
Yeah, totally. I
is
totally could have
pre-Etsy.
made Kids in the Hall merch, unauthorized. But
Wow.
yeah, anyway, so I did appreciate that they have updated their humor a lot, so they acknowledge that they are old now.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
There was one really funny sketch called 60 on the Pole where, they're a bunch of grandpas and they're trying to be strippers, and one of them, the zipper on his tracksuit gets stuck, so his wife is in the audience and she has to come up and undo it, and then
So there's a lot of genius moments like that.
Yeah, totally.
They're definitely inspired bits. I just didn't think the consistency was there. The segment that Dave Foley did It was a recurring segment in the one episode of him as a radio guy in a post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, Apocalypse DJ or something like
Yeah,
that.
and that was just sad to me. That was just like, it made me want to not watch that anymore. Like every time it came on, I was like, oh, Dave Foley with the suicidal DJ. It's just not funny. Like it was, but I understand that's their oeuvre. Like that's their style, is that they really try to push the envelope and they try to make people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what comedy is in a lot of ways too, right? Is like pushing the boundaries of what's comfortable. So I get that, but at the same time, it's like, well, it's got to be funny too, though.
The lady who's 45 he was playing, she was like trending in Canada. And I'm not going to lie, I had that song going through my head for a few days after we watched that episode too. Like,
so the episode, what I'm talking about there in that segment and what Coco's referring to is he only has one record to play. So he's playing
and it's a literal 45. It's a literal record. It's not. And
it's roller skates or something like that.
Brand New Key by Melanie.
Right. And he said it enough times. I'm surprised that I forgot it. But I was thinking as he was dropping the needle on this same song over and over again, I was thinking, there's a song on the other side. It's a record. Like, play the other side. Like, for the love of God, man. But I understand why that was not happening, because it's the bit, you know.
Yeah.
So
and there were lots of like throwaway lines to like diversity and stuff these days. Like, oh, you can't get away with that. Like, you know, this isn't the 80s and stuff. And I was like, you know, I like that they're, you know, saying,
they're aware.
Yeah, they're aware that they can't necessarily get away with stuff that they got away with back in the day. But they don't seem like the Chappelle sort to be upset about that, you know.
So I know that they had problems with the censors at CBC back in the day.
They don't have any censors at Amazon.
So this is where I'm going with that, is that they took full advantage of the fact that this is going to be the essential, or I guess the equivalent to back in the day to being on HBO versus being on the CBC. So you could do whatever you wanted to, and we had frontal male nudity.
Like the first sketch.
The first sketch
after
was
the credits in episode 1. You see double full frontal.
Right.
Like,
yeah, and I was not prepared for that.
I wasn't either.
And I mean, how do you prepare for seeing naked kids in the hall?
Right.
Like they're not going to show that in the trailer.
I was like, wow, but we're kicking this off with a bang.
Right, there we go. There's some flopping going on there because they had to jump up and down. And
props to them. Like,
oh yeah,
they're not Brad Pitt, you know,
right.
Like they're not Hollywood leading men. Like they look like 60-year-old naked guys, you know, and they were just care. Like, here's my doings, you know? Here's my bum, here's my flabby bum and my 80 pack, you know? Like,
well, Kevin McDonald was naked twice, and like he had in 2 separate skits, and he had no problem whatsoever. It seemed like, and it was kind of funny. It was like, you know, the one scene where he wanted his bath hot, and he kept complaining to the landlord about it, and that I didn't really find that all that funny, but it was interesting. It was nice to see. I think we need more of that kind of stuff. Like I think Will Ferrell was kind of like the pioneer of that, is like regular guy body and regular people body in some ways. It's like, you don't have to be a supermodel. You don't have to be like a Hollywood starlet. You don't have to be Brad Pitt. Like, that's kind of funny, but it's also, I think, bringing down some of the barriers and some of the reluctance to that kind of thing. Is like, oh, that guy's ugly. It's like, well, it's just like you and I. I mean, it's just like everybody.
We've said this before. We watch
well, maybe
a lot
not you.
of.
I mean, you got a better body than
Stop. We've
Kevin
reviewed
McDonald.
A lot. That's not. I mean, no offense to Kevin McDonald, but that's really not a compliment.
I was just seeing if you were paying attention.
We've reviewed a lot of European streaming series, and that's one of the things that we consistently tend to call out that we enjoy about them, is that people look normal.
Yeah.
They aren't all impossibly beautiful with 6-packs like Brad Pitt, like Emma Stone, like Ryan Gosling. You know, they just look like normal people.
Right.
Exactly. So I do give them props for just, you know, being like, yep, here I am. You know, Amazon's going to let us do it, so we're doing it.
It's like, how many boundaries can we push? Let's push that, and let's push the. There was one other thing with the vomiting. Like there was one skit where there was actual vomiting. It was disgusting. Do you remember that one?
I don't remember that one.
And like, so there were some things that the CBC wouldn't have allowed. I mean, the CBC probably would have allowed the rear nudity. You know, from the behind.
Just a bum.
Just a bum, exactly. But I don't the hopping up and down in front of the camera, full frontal, that wouldn't have flown.
I will say, there were some sketches that were not. They did bring back a lot of the characters from the original show. That was nice to see.
Which is good, yeah.
Yeah, there was a sketch that Bruce did, and I cannot remember the name of the kid, but he's an overgrown kid, and he's got his backpack, and he's in like an OBGYN office, like talking to ladies, and that wasn't...
You know who he reminded me of in that skit?
Who?
Bubbles.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if Bubbles was like Bubbles from the Trailer Park Boys, which is also a huge Canadian hit. I wonder if he was sort of like an inspiration for Bubbles. I wonder that character, because although Bubbles is smarter than that kid, but the thick glasses and the innocence and stuff like that, I thought that was interesting.
So I liked that they brought back some of the recurring characters. Some of the recurring characters I wish they brought back that didn't make an appearance, but there could be a new season coming up. Apparently, this past weekend was like make or break for whether they were going to renew another series, because it was all over Twitter. Like Scott Thompson and Dave Foley were all over Twitter saying
it'll be back.
It'll
be back.
It's such a huge show. Like it's a built-in audience.
Yeah, it's iconic. I was always more of a Second City / SCTV guy. Like I thought those guys were great, and they were, I wouldn't say necessarily traditional, because they were edgy a little bit, but it was more, the target was TV, and it was more concentrated, and it was more relatable to me. So I always liked SCTV better in terms of Canadian comedy troops than Kids in the Hall. But you can't understate their influence, and the fact that they were, they have some guests on these episodes that are people that are well known, and they're obviously fans of Kids in the Hall. So it was definitely an influential troupe. It's just not my brand of humor. It's just not my style of humor.
And they had more extras in this season than I remember there being in seasons past.
Oh, other people talking?
Or just like other people playing parts. Like when the Eradicator came back and he was from like a 20-year coma. And so he's playing like a young generation of squash players. And they actually had a couple like 20 or 30 something guys, which on the one hand I understand, because all the Kids in the Hall are in their 60s. So you can't have, the Eradicator coming back and playing a bunch of 60-year-old guys. But I don't remember there being so many extras with speaking parts in the previous seasons.
And Paul Bellini too, he
was only in it once, or like in the very first episode. I think we only saw Paul Bellini, and there was one episode, I believe it was the last sketch of maybe episode 2, where they were like AT&T Love employees were on a Zoom meeting, and then they all start masturbating, and it's like 5 of the Kids in the Hall, and then like 1 lady of color,
right?
And I'm like, why didn't you just bring the 6th, or no, it was 4 Kids in the Hall, wasn't it?
I thought they were all there.
Were they all there?
Yeah.
Because I thought one of them was missing, and I was like, why didn't they just bring in all of them? I don't know.
And that was just a really uncomfortable skit too. I thought it was just
it was really fun. It was funny. Mark McKinney's ass in it too. So speaking of like nudity,
well, it was nice that they tried a Zoom skit, because that's very much of today,
right? And
very contextual and very modern, and they would have done something like that back in the day. They would have done something contextual, and I like the idea of it. It just completely deteriorated and went down the masturbatory path that I thought that was kind of easy. I thought it was kind of an easy way to do that skit, but the way that they did it with the, we gave you a drink and it tracks when you're masturbating. So whenever you're masturbating, your screen will light up in red. And I thought, well, that's a good concept. Like you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, and your screen is going to light up. Like if we did that on Zoom meetings, there would, like, people were not wearing pants in Zoom meetings anymore. Right. I mean, why would you?
And the first person who got popped for masturbating was Danny, who, if you remember from the original show, was in a porno movie called Room Serviced. So because the head of AT&T Love randomly found it at Blockbuster or something and called Danny into his office and was like, Danny, is this you? And
yeah. So this is also a bit of a study of the modern comedy approach, in that, to me anyway, is that some people say that, and this applies to stand-up too, is that some people say that comedians will introduce something that's not funny to make the other stuff funnier. And So my thought is like, what happened to the funny stuff?
All right, so what grade do you give it then?
Oh, I'm 6.8. It's got to be.
No, you can't go hard on it and be like, it wasn't funny, and then give it like basically the same thing that you give everything.
I'll give it a 5. I was just kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's still higher than I thought. You're not doing this because of me, are you?
Yes, I am, actually. I don't want to sleep on the couch.
I slept on the couch last night, but that's because I couldn't sleep. So if anybody's moving to the couch, it's me, because I'm going to worry about like tossing and turning and waking you up.
I think it was because I was snoring, and you're just being kind.
Not last night.
So out of 10, no, you're doing 26 letters, aren't you? So
yeah.
What do you give it, not adults?
I give it like a B.
A B?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did it meet your expectations? Because, we were talking off air about this, and that you were, before we watched it, you were like, I wonder if it's going to be one of those things where I liked it back in the day, and now I don't like it because I've, a lot of time has passed.
Yeah.
A lot of things have happened in your life, and it changes you and everything. And, do you have the same sense of humor, blah, blah, blah. But that seemed like it didn't play into this. You liked it just the same or not?
I liked it almost the same.
Almost
like
the same.
I would want to go back and rewatch more of the original episodes.
Which we did do, actually.
We did watch like 3 or so of the original episodes after this.
And then I had to leave the room.
Well, also it was like late. So wasn't it late? Or you had to like drive your daughter back to her mom's house or something like that?
Something, but quote unquote late.
Yeah. So I would want to watch more of them because I have like such fond memories of the original and so I would like to see more to see how it compares. Like, I think I did start off like, the full frontal was just like, oh, okay, we're in this. And then like, but then I was a little bit disappointed with how it started. But then, like I said, it felt like it picked up speed, like as they went along. So
I was interested because the way we watched it back in the day is you had no idea what the sequence was or anything like that. Like they just showed up and you watched them right on CBC. And I was interested to see that the very first skit on the very first episode was the Eradicator, and the Eradicator was like a good 5-minute skit, like 5 to 7 minutes long. And it was interesting the way they did that. Is that like nowadays the skits are a lot shorter, they're a lot punchier, and they're a lot, when they have a longer skit, they do like they did with the radio thing, is they spread it out over the course of the episode and intermingle other skits in between. So I thought that was interesting, but I think it's definitely an acquired taste. If you liked them before, I think it's worth going in on.
I mean, it's 8 episodes, and they're under a half hour.
And they're short, yeah.
So you can knock this out in like 3.5 hours,
right.
Easy. Also, shadowy men on a shadowy planet.
Yes.
Back with the theme music.
Yes.
So
and they're sharp too, and they're actually in this, whereas in the other one they're not in the intro part. It's all the characters. It's all the actors, I should say, the comedians in the original, because we watched it. And in the newer version, they're actually playing. There's shots of them playing the song.
I think in the last season, there might have been one shot of them playing the song for like a second in the credits. So,
like the guy from Wheel of Fortune who all of a sudden just keeps showing up in the...
No, not at all. No.
So
these guys have talent.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. All right. So anything else to add, not adults?
Please, Amazon, bring us another season. Like, you got the money. Come on. Like,
I don't see how they don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, they've got like all 5 of the original seasons on. They've got this season. It's a known brand.
It's Canadian content, which the streaming services in Canada must provide a certain percentage of, as in terms of like the CRTC in Canada requires Global and CTV and all them to have a certain amount of Canadian. So they're going in that direction. So this would be a very easy way to do that.
Yeah, and it's got 40 years of name recognition behind it, practically. So 35. And so why would you not?
The guys haven't really changed all that much. I mean, some of them have puffed up a little bit, as we all do. But
Bruce and Scott basically look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like, Bruce has a little bit more gray in his hair, but otherwise they look exactly the same.
And they're easily recognizable. Like all of them, you know who they are immediately. Yeah. It's not like sometimes when you see guys like 40 years ago and you see them now and you're like, what happened?
Or you look at a Kardashian from 10 years ago and now here they are like 3 nose jobs and a brow lift later, and you're like, wow, that's not just...
This is a good time for us to go.
That's not just contouring.
Time to go. So for another edition of the podcast, thank you very much for listening, listener. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dolph.